Hello everyone, my name is Tom Banke and I work with Forward Community Investments. I'd like to welcome you all to our Kickoff webinar for our Building Nonprofit Sustainability, a financial learning series for the Green Bay cohort. Just as a reminder, we are recording this webinar as well. So if there are some members of your organization that were unable to make it to the webinar today, they will have a chance to catch up and review the webinar after the fact. I will send out an email to everyone probably tomorrow with a link to our YouTube channel that will have this webinar available. We recommend using your computer's audio to listen in, but you can also dial into the call by using the information that's listed on the slide that you're seeing now. We'll go over just a quick agenda of what we're going to be getting accomplished today. First off, we'd like to welcome everybody. We'd also like to give a big thank you to our sponsors, because obviously without their generous sponsorship, we wouldn't be able to do this series and provide it for you. And then we'll go into a little bit about FCI, a little bit about Forward Community Investments, discuss a little bit about the baseline evaluation that we'll be taking, just a general overview of the learning series itself, introduce some pre-work reading, and we'll follow that up with some question and answers at the end. So right now I'll turn it over to my colleague Ben, who will be saying some wonderful things about our sponsors.
Great, and hello everyone. My name is Ben Williams. As Tom said, I'm the Director of Advisory Services, and I'll be with you for a good number of our learning series sessions. Before we begin, I just want to again emphasize how grateful we are for the support of our sponsors. It's really without their collaboration together that we would be able to bring this series together. So a big thank you to the Greater Green Bay Community Foundation and David there, Mary Hart Jerslich and the J.J. Keller Foundation, Andrew and Dennis at Associated Bank, Dave and everyone else over at Schenck. Without their coming together as a team, we wouldn't be able to provide this series, and so we're very grateful for all of their help.
Great, thanks Ben. Now we'll go into a little bit of background about Forward Community Investments. We are a community loan fund that builds capacity in nonprofits across the state through low-cost loans and expert advisory services. As the most established financial management advisor of its kind in Wisconsin, FCI provides its clients with guidance, resources, skills, and capacity building as a means of building a strong, secure, and sustainable statewide nonprofit community. Our vision is a strong, secure, and sustainable nonprofit community throughout Wisconsin. We transform communities by building capacity in mission-based organizations through leveraging low-cost capital, expert advisory services, and timely resources. We do this with integrity and through a commitment to excellence by being good stewards and in a foundation of both innovation and collaboration. For those of you who aren't familiar with FCI, let me tell you a little bit about us and the work that we do. FCI has been around for almost 20 years. We are chartered by the U.S. Treasury as a Community Development Financial Institution, or for short, CDFI. Historically, and as a CDFI, we are a lender providing access to capital to nonprofits serving low to moderate income individuals. We have always provided training and technical assistance to borrowers, and over the last few years expanded that learning and development beyond borrowers to formalize into our advisory services. Today, our organization is delineated into 4 areas: advisory services, investments, lending services, and research initiatives. Advisory services includes learning, like this series, and one-to-one advising in the areas of capacity building, financial assessment, business planning, and strategy development. As a CDFI, we need to raise capital to lend. Investments earn a competitive rate of return, and our investors include financial institutions, nonprofits, religious organizations, and socially responsible individuals. As I mentioned, we are known as a lender, providing access to capital through attractive terms and/or conditions that conventional lenders typically won't consider. We offer both loans and lines of credit for new construction, acquisition, and rehabilitation of existing facilities, leasehold improvements, pre-development, equipment, and working capital. Forward Community Investments has engaged in research initiatives over the last 5 years, producing a statewide nonprofit economic impact report that Ben will be referencing shortly. And currently, last year, FCI merged with the Wisconsin Community Fund, a grassroots grant-making organization, in order to expand our ability to impact communities by integrating lending, advising, and grant-making services. So that's enough about us. Let's take some time to learn about who's going to be in the cohort today using some of the tools of GoToMeeting. We're going to launch a poll in a few seconds here asking what is your role in the organization?
Great, and thank you, Tom. It looks like about 2/3 to 3/4 of us have started voting, and it's relatively evenly split at about 40% between executive directors and staff members, and about 20 or so % are board members. It looks like just about everyone has participated now, and so I'll take a close on it. That's good that we have such a broad stretch between each role in the organization. We're excited to bring this series, and I think one of the great advantages of it is that it connects the staff leadership with the executive director and the board members in the learning events, and so having different members attend from each of those roles is really a powerful part of this series. Before I begin with the overview of what we're hoping to accomplish in each of our sessions, today I want you to think about and consider, what do you most want to get out of this learning series? So what are those issues, questions that are kind of pushed you to apply for this series, and what you'd hope to get? And so if you go to the questions box on the tab with the GoToMeeting style, and you can enter in what is your goal or burning question that you have in the learning series. We'll get back to those at the end of the session. As we go through and give overviews of each of the individual sessions and on what those learning outcomes are, please enter in any questions you have then as well, and we'll talk about those. We want to make sure that what we cover in the sessions is tailored specifically to what your needs are and your questions. So as we go forward, please do consider those, and Tom will be keeping track of those responses as you come in. So thank you for those that are already starting to submit some questions. So I want to start with just a big picture overview, and Tom gave a great highlight of FCI. When we started doing this learning series 2 years ago, it was from some of the research we conducted in our survey. We noticed that many organizations are not using financial tools that would help them make better decisions based on their information, and we really felt that altered the outlook that they took on their next steps, as well as their confidence in their organization's sustainability in the future. And so we took our experience as a lender and as an advisor to organizations and created a learning series that focused on financial understanding of budgets, of calculating program costs, of managing cash flow, and how to integrate long-term metrics and considerations into the trajectory of your organization. And that really formed the basis of our learning series in the past year in the classroom learning. This year we've added an extra session, which we'll go into more detail in a little bit. And we found that in a learning series, what we can show and teach and learn from each other in the classroom learning is just one part of what can really make for successful impact on your organization and the way that you can use these tools. And so we try to incorporate a case study actually of a borrower of ours that we've sanitized and changed some of the details to illustrate how these tools can be used in an organization. And then we have many breakouts during each session where you can consider, how would I use this for my organization? So if it's talking about calculating program costs, what would that look like for me? How would I calculate it in these cases? If it's on nonprofit strategy, it's how would I look at my current model and make those reflections? We integrate some pre and post work, typically in reading and articles for further consideration. And I'll be sending out a couple links to some that'll be useful as we begin this series. But this is a way to deepen your understanding and see other resources out there that are available. I think one of the most important things about our session, after each one, we provide some hands-on tools and resources that you can use to apply what we've discussed and learned for your organization. So when we do a session on capacity building and how do we assess our organization's current capacity, we provide tools that you can use to assess it for your organization. Similarly, with the budgeting and calculating program costs in each of the following sessions, we make sure to provide tools so that you can enact these and implement them in your organization. To help you with it, because we know when you're learning it in the moment, it may make sense, but then when you're actually implementing it 2 or 3 months down the road or during the time in between our sessions, you often want to have questions. And so we try to integrate individual coaching, and so at each session we will have available times that we can set up to have a phone conversation to talk about specifically what's going on in your organization, what are those needs or issues that you have, or what are challenges that came up as you were considering things during some of the previous sessions. And this individual coaching is really our way to help you best use the tools that we're providing in these series. Lastly, we try to supplement the series with virtual leadership series, which is our webinar programs. Our next session is in a couple weeks, I believe, with Kate Byrne to talk about nonprofit marketing. It'll be a great session. We'll send out a link to register for that. I believe that's coming up in just a week or two.
Yes, Kate Byrne will be speaking on marketing on Friday, October 4th. The webinar will be at noon, and it's a great resource. Our monthly webinar series is a great resource for all nonprofits. I would highly recommend everyone checking them out, and also too, like I had mentioned with this webinar, we do record those, so you do have the availability to go back and rewatch them.
Great, thank you, Tom. On the bottom of this slide, there's a quote about sustainability, which I think really captures what we're trying to bring to this learning series, and that's that sustainability encompasses both the financial side, the ability to generate those resources to keep your organization running, and also a programmatic side, which is really how do we develop our programs and the services that we're offering to reach the highest impact. And so how do we deliver our missions in a more effective way, and also in a way that can keep us financially sustainable so that we can continue to do it in years forward. And so we really take that to heart, and we try to make the tools that we're providing relevant to reaching those goals. One of the biggest questions that we hear early on is who should attend from my organization? I think we had several questions about this already. In the application, we say that no more than 3 members from each organization can attend, and that's so that we can keep the learning at a manageable size, both for the space that we're using and also for the learning interaction, so that there's space for us to go around one-on-one and space for you to work together in groups. But who attends each session can rotate. We typically recommend that there be at least 1 member who stays for every single session. Typically that's the executive director. But then depending on the session or on people's availability, the program staff leaders, the finance managers, or the board members that attend can rotate. Obviously we'd love to have the same 3 people attend each session, but we know that scheduling, particularly for board members, can be very challenging. And so if you want to rotate, we want to make sure that you best use this opportunity, and so that you have 3 people attend each one. Part of our learning and our dedication to the series is evaluating how are we doing. So after each session, we ask for feedback on how we did, what can we do differently, what would you like to see more of. But we also try to take a look at the very beginning of the series, before we get into any of the learning, what is our baseline level of financial awareness and knowledge based on each of the sessions that we'll be attending. And so we'll have a baseline evaluation. So it'll take about 20 to 30 minutes at the very beginning of our session next week. And it's important for us to be able to demonstrate what change occurs based on the learning that we do together. And it's also important for us to make sure that we tailor the series to fit what you need. And so just as examples, in some communities, the cohort is typically smaller organizations or may have a specific focus in terms of their programs. And so we'll want to make sure that we tailor everything to best fit what their needs are. In Green Bay, I believe the organizations have a similar range in size, and so that we'll be able to tailor this to make sure we're fitting each of those concerns. And this is why it's really critical for us to understand this, and it's also important as part of our logic model for how we demonstrate our success that we can go back to our sponsors and funders and say, look, based on what we've done, this is what we've been able to achieve. It also helps us to help you as we follow up 6 months down the road after the learning series to see what have we been able to implement. And so once we're done in March, we're going to continue to follow up for the next 6 months afterwards to see how you're using these tools and how they're working for you. This next slide has a list of each of the sessions and the topics, and then I'll go into a little bit more detail about what we're looking to accomplish in each one of these. Our first session, again, is next week, October 1st, and this is on building capacity is building success. The session in November will be on integrating strategy into your organization, so both how do we think strategically, and then give a broad way of how can we incorporate strategy into our programs, our finance, and our operations. The next 4 sessions are what really encompasses the finance-heavy topics. So how do we budget and think of our budget and connecting that to our strategy in a way that will make us most successful? How do we calculate true program costs to understand what it really takes to provide our services to just a single individual? And how do we look at programs that might have a high mission impact but might not be financially sustainable? How can we find a way to either contain those costs or make them subsidized by other programs? Managing cash flow. If our cash flow is varying quite a bit, that changes the options that are present for us, and so using cash flow projections is a way to affect that. And lastly, putting the fun into nonprofit finance. This is our slightly tongue-in-cheek answer for how do we take what can be oftentimes complex financial information that's trended over multiple years and communicate it in a way that is easy to understand for our program staff, for our board members, and for community stakeholders. And so this is really taking what we've learned in all the other sessions, how do we tie that together in a way that we can communicate it well. We also have an extra date held the following week in March. As we know, these sessions will be occurring over the winter months, and in northern Wisconsin, we know that that means that the weather may be unpredictable, so we wanted to hold an extra date just in case one of these sessions needs to be canceled. And so I hope that you put this one on your calendar as well. In case we miss one of the other sessions, we can set up the time so that fits. So now I'm going to go through a little bit more detail on each of these learning objectives. And so as you're hearing this, if you have other questions that come up about that you want more follow-up on, or if this is an area that you really do want to focus on for your organization, please continue to enter those questions in as we go, and then we'll open it up, and Tom will let us know what questions came in, and I can have a question and answer session at the end. So for the first session on building capacity, this is really taking a look at our organization in a comprehensive and thorough way to assess where are those areas that we're very strong in, and where are those areas that, if we were to focus our attention on them more, could really help us leverage our impact and be more effective as an organization. And so we'll use this framework of assessing that through these 9 elements of organizational effectiveness. And then we have a tool that will help prioritize those and then create an action plan so that if we've identified a certain area that we need to focus on, whether it be board engagement or strategic thinking or program connectivity, that we can have a plan that can establish how do we make a difference in that area in the next 6, 12, and 18 months as a way to effectively build our capacity. The second session, once we've taken a look at ourselves at a whole comprehensive level, is really focusing on our mission, our vision, and our strategy. And so we start off with how does this capacity building inform our strategy development. I think strategy often has a lot of lexicon and jargon that can be very confusing and may differ, especially based on different funders' requests. And so we want to make sure that we have a clear, unified sense of what we're talking about when we use these different terms in strategy, and so just that we can all be on the same page. And we'll go through a generic process of how you can best develop your organization's strategies in a way that's meaningful and engaging before looking at opportunities to connect our mission, impact, and strategy into our finances. So how do we bring our strategic thinking and our financial planning together in a way that makes our organization unified and as effective as possible. Lastly, a big part of this session will be introducing the real-time strategic planning model, which we use internally and with our one-on-one advising clients to integrate strategic thinking on an ongoing basis. So it isn't just we're going to plan for a month and then that's going to keep us going for the next 3 years and then we'll plan again then. This is about how do we react to new situations. As we all know, the environment that we're operating in today is not much like the environment last year or the year before based on what we would have expected. And so this model is very effective, I think, in finding a way to be able to react to those changes and have your strategy be an ongoing process. Both of these sessions are great ones to bring your board leadership to as well as your staff members if you had to prioritize which ones, because I think this is a great conversation to have with both staff and board at these two. The next session is on budgeting. So this is really talking about what kind of budgets work best for our organization and how do we use a mission-based approach to budgeting. So instead of starting off with, okay, this is everything that we want to spend, now how are we going to find the money for it? And if there's a gap, then that's the board's responsibility. This is how we look at what are the most mission-critical things we need to accomplish, what income do we have available to do that, and then looking at our expenses. And so how do we integrate that planning in a way that makes the most sense and connects those mission outcomes that tie to our budget in the best way possible. Lastly, we'll talk about establishing cash reserves and the board and staff's role and ability to do that. The following session, calculating true program costs. This is often where we talk about what overhead means and administrative costs, and we kind of eliminate some of the confusion surrounding that. We outline some distinct methods for how we can allocate our costs in a way that's most meaningful and suitable for our organizations. And then I think the most important part is looking at our programs, which ones are financially strong and sustainable, and which ones, and also including how mission critical and mission impactful they are for each one, and looking at that constellation of programs and what that means for our organization and our strategies. Oftentimes nonprofits have organizations that are mission critical, they're the heart of what we do, but they're not financially sustainable. So how do we subsidize that, or how do we look at other programs that could offset some of those expenses? And then how do we communicate these findings to our stakeholders, both on the board and in the community and our funders? The fifth session is on managing cash flow and understanding the importance of doing so. For anyone who receives government contracts, I think you can relate to the fact that oftentimes you're doing the work and incurring those expenses before you're getting paid for those services, and this is a cash flow challenge. And so how do we manage that and mitigate those challenges is often through starting with a projection of looking at where those keep, and how do we then take changes to our approach to best fit that, whether it be communicating with our external stakeholders to change the funding timing, or using credit or cash reserves to address those issues. That's really going to be the focus of this session on managing cash flow. Our final session, putting the fun into nonprofit finance. Again, this is going to start with a high-level overview of financial reports and how they inform our organization, and then looking at how do we use some ratios and tools that can help us make more thoughtful decisions in an easier way. So instead of looking at a 40-page treasury report, how can we boil down those key issues that are both mission and strategy based, as well as those that are more financially oriented, into a single page or 2 pages that can really express our organization's condition. This is another great session to bring board members to, and I think it can be really impactful to be able to demonstrate the connection between your programming, your mission goals, and your finances that really, in a simple way, can demonstrate how they're tied together. I think this is one of the most powerful areas that organizations have an opportunity to improve on, and for those organizations that we've been helping with creating these dashboards, it's been really impactful for them. So that is a summary of each of the sessions. I know Tom has been collecting some feedback. I want to just talk for a little bit about 2 articles that I think will set a great tone for thought and discussion. One is Nonprofit Life Cycle Stages, Knowing What's Normal and What's Next. This is really talking about, depending on our organization and where we're at in our growth, whether we're a new organization or if we have programming that's very, in its first life cycle stage of kind of idea and invention, versus an organization that's been in the community for many, many years doing a similar type project. The types of challenges and questions that are facing us really vary, and being aware of these differences can be really useful. And so this is a great article that kind of gives a summary of that, and we'll be talking about that more in our strategy session in particular, but it's also helpful to read before we do our capacity building. The second article listed here, An Executive Director's Guide to Financial Leadership. This was written in the Nonprofit Quarterly by one of our sister organizations in Minnesota, Kate Barr. And I think it's a great summary of what it means to be a leader in your finances as opposed to just a manager of your finances. And I think this really sets the tone for what we're hoping to accomplish as organizations together in those finance-oriented classes. And so we'll send out links to these in the follow-up along with the recording for you to read before we go. So I know that there's been quite a few questions that have been coming in, and so please continue to type them into the chat or question box that you have on your screen, and I'll just open up to Tom to let me know what some of those are, and we can discuss them.
Sure. Thanks to everybody who participated. This has been a great group. You guys have participated quite a bit, so this is great. Some of the questions, I'm seeing some trends that are coming through. Just learning more about sustainability and finances for nonprofit organizations. One individual referenced how to communicate better with your board. Sometimes you feel like you're on two different wavelengths.
That's a great one. I want to pause there. I think we'll be talking about how do we make those communications through each session. So having some board members attend, I think, will be a great way so that they see what you're learning as well. And that's why it's so important to have board members come to these sessions, I think. And we'll talk about that particularly in the final session on the dashboard, but in the other sessions around program costs, and is it okay for us to be subsidizing programs, and there's other sessions there where we can really focus on it. It's also a great thing to have for that individual coaching where we can talk about what are those particular challenges that we have and how can we address it. So that's a great one.
Yeah, and then a lot of how to budget success, I think, seems to be a trend that I'm seeing in these questions, that they would like to achieve budget success and calculating true program costs, managing cash flow, and just a lot of similar goals with budgeting and cash flow, and dealing specifically to the nonprofit world, and just donor loyalty. That seems to be something that folks have been hitting on, that they want to
so how do
discover.
We engage our stakeholders?
Exactly.
Great. Yeah, I think that's something that we'll talk about a lot. And a lot of these questions that you're bringing, take them with you to these sessions, and I think that's going to be a good thing. One of the things that we've found from our experience as facilitators of the learning series is, as much as you learn from us, I think there's much more that can be gained from the collective knowledge and information that all of the other organizations that are participating have. And so we're going to try to spend as much time as possible in small groups thinking, one, about our own organization and how does this topic impact us and how can we think about this in a different way, and then bring it out to the full group and have that discussion where we can really look and say, well, what are some things that you see and I see, and I think the ideas that are generated there can be great. Just as an example, in one of the sessions on strategy we had recently in a different community, one organization said, when we're trying to reach our mission goal, we were talking about logic models, we always run into this barrier of mental health challenges that come along with people that are participating in our program, but that's completely outside of our purview. And then someone else raised their hand and said, well, we're the Mental Health America organization. We're more than happy. We should be collaborating together. And so I think there's a lot that can be gained by bringing these different organizations together. And so I think being as outgoing as possible with one another, and we'll be sure to reinforce this as a group when we create some kind of rules and agreements for how we want to operate together. I think there's a lot to be gained from each other and not just from us. But we're really excited to bring to bring this information forward. So again, thank you for all of your questions. We have gone through this material relatively quickly, so I'll just hold for another second. If there are any other questions logistically, I'll give a reminder for our location. I think the biggest thing for the first session is that we're going to be spending a bit of time doing the baseline evaluation, so please do arrive at 12:30 so that we can begin those evaluations. You can start filling out those evaluations right away, and then we can get the session started. So as a reminder on the location, it'll be at the Green Bay Botanical Garden, which I think will be beautiful at this time of year. The address we've listed here. Tom will be sending out a reminder both tomorrow after the session with the links to the article and the recording, and then again probably the day before, on Monday before the session, to welcome you. So I'd just like to say again a big thank you from everyone at Forward Community Investments. Tom, Dennis, and I are really excited to bring this series to you, and I think we're going to have a great time. Dennis Johnson, the Vice President of Advisory Services, will be leading you through the first session on capacity building, and I think I'll be coming in the next month. But we're really looking forward to this. If you do have any questions along the way or beforehand, do not hesitate to reach out to us. We've listed our joint email address up here, advisoryservices@forwardci.org, or give us a call. We're more than happy to help you. If there's questions that you have specific to your organization and you know you want to have that conversation early on, give us a call and we can set up a time to have those. Otherwise, we'll be bringing a list of times to sign up for so that we can make sure we each get the most out of this as possible. Great. Well, thank you all again. Have a wonderful remainder to your day, and we will see you next week.
Take care, everyone.